Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm Rob Hall, and I'm the Executive Director of Resilience First. It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to the Resilience First webinar held in partnership with Facebook and ICAEW. And by way of introduction, Resilience First mission is to help build resilience in business communities, wherever those communities may be, or defined by geography or special interest. For those of you who viewed the opening video, I hope you gained a brief insight on our organisation. Since we started just over 2 years ago, we've attracted a wide range of major companies as champions, as well as a host of affiliated organisations and members of our network, all willing to spread the word and work through best practices and learning. In that vein, and working with Facebook and ICAEW, we've organised today's webinar to shed some light on those actions that small and medium-sized businesses can take to help recovery and resilience, not just to the current pandemic, but to any other major disruption that may and probably will occur in the future. Reportedly, small and medium-sized businesses account for around 60% of the employment and around half of the turnover of the UK's private sector. Other advanced industrial countries are likely to have similar proportions. It is also known that such businesses experience a high closure rate after major incidents, whether the cause be floods or pandemic. So bouncing back or building back together, as the UK government proclaims, is often a hard task that may take some time. Hence, we have much to talk about this afternoon. To help make sense of the topic today, we have some great speakers who will shortly be introduced by our chairman for the webinar, Ian Wright, who is Director for Business and Industrial Strategy at the Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales, otherwise ACAW. Besides being a former Member of Parliament, Ian was also chair of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee from 2015 to 2017. You'll find Ian's career and those of the other speakers in your joining instructions. So before handing the proceedings across to the chair, I'll invite you to ask questions of the speakers throughout the session by posting your short written questions in the chat box to the right of your screen. Please make them short, then we can get more questions in at the end. And I'm sure the chair will pick as many as he can as we progress through the webinar. So thank you again, and I'll hand over now to Ian. Ian, the floor is yours.
Robert, many thanks for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's a real honour for me personally and for ICAEW to be involved in this. And I just want to thank Resilience First for pulling together what I think is a really strong, high calibre panellists feature, but also this webinar, which is really vital. Robert mentioned about the high proportion, certainly in the UK, of turnover for small businesses. And actually, if you look at the business base, we are a nation of small businesses. Some 99.3% of all businesses in the UK, and this will be true across the developed world as well, 99.3% of businesses in the UK employ fewer than 50 people. 76% of those businesses only have one employee, which is their owner. Those owners rely very much upon the success or failure of that business for their quality of life, indeed their livelihood. So it's really important that when we've seen the biggest shock in modern economic times, that we're able to ensure that all the factors are put in place to help allow small businesses to recover. But of course, there are huge challenges. And small businesses, as Robert said in his opening remarks, will be disproportionately hit. The downturn in economic activity will mean that there is less activity going on, which will hit small businesses. And the characteristics of small businesses, certainly in the UK, round about 15% of small businesses are in the professional, scientific and technical fields. They're largely accountants and other professional advisors. And when the economy falls, their business falls too. Also, one of the things that's really important for small businesses is they tend to favour sectors which are B2C, business to consumer, but also they are very much reliant upon face-to-face contact. Something like 1 in 10 of small businesses in the UK are retail and involved in that whole hospitality supply chain as well. If you can't meet people in order to carry out your business is in larger risk of failing. And of course, as larger firms cut their activity, businesses within the supply chain will suffer too. But overriding all of that is that small businesses have fewer resources, smaller cash reserves in order to be able to survive something like a massive economic shock or a second wave of a public health tragedy. So in those very, very difficult circumstances, what opportunities are there in order to make sure that businesses can recover? What is needed, both from the businesses themselves, but also from government, from larger businesses, to make sure that businesses can be as resilient as possible? And we've got a huge, very high quality panel who will be able to talk about this. I'll come to the panel in a moment, but Robert mentioned that this webinar is being carried out in conjunction with Facebook. And I'm really pleased to introduce Deji Anna, who is the head of global business continuity at Facebook. And I understand that you're close to San Francisco at the moment, Deji. So thank you very much for attending this. It's a real pleasure and an honor to have you. If you don't mind, I just want to start off with a couple of questions for you, if I may. So to a large extent, the world shut down in February or March. We've had 6 months of extremely unusual, if not unprecedented, economic conditions. Businesses, people will have had to adapt. But one of the things that I'm interested in from your point of view and from Facebook's point of view is, how are businesses, small businesses in particular, using Facebook and the various companies associated with the company, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever, how are they using your platforms now in a way that was different before the pandemic took place?
Thank you, Ian. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay? Absolutely. Yeah, Ian, it's no secret, right, that when small businesses succeed, our communities thrive. And when small businesses are, as they always are, at the heart of our communities, they're very important to us. And from the coffee shops to the bookstores to restaurants, the wedding planners, when they succeed, the communities succeed, and Facebook is really empowering communities to be able to succeed in these areas. We want to build and empower communities and make sure that as they grow and sell, they can continue to make sure that we reduce income inequality, because that is the gateway to reducing poverty. There are over 160 million businesses across the world that use Facebook's suite of products, from Facebook to Instagram to WhatsApp to Messenger. And Facebook is committed to continually listen to small businesses and develop avenues and products that will continue to ensure survival of small businesses around the globe. So to be very clear, what are the things that Facebook has done and really to support, and how our business is utilizing the platform? First is access to cash grants and ad credits. Since the pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization earlier in the year, Facebook has committed $100 million to over 30,000 small businesses in 30 countries. And small businesses have been accessing these funds to support their operational needs, pay their workforce, pay for rent, and continue to use that to support their lifelines. In the United States alone, Facebook committed another $100 million over the summer to support 10,000 Black-owned businesses in the United States. And there are numerous testimonies of small businesses that have taken advantage of this cash grant, as well as some of the ad credits. A good example is Sylvia in Mexico City, who has a botanical store that connects artisans to farmers to the community that they serve. 3 years ago, this business started, and she grew to have about 6 to 8 employees. But then the pandemic struck, and she had to pivot creatively to utilizing Facebook and Instagram to support a business. And I can say with so much glee that now 60% of her revenue is able to support a business because she's able to create content and reach out to people through our platform. Another avenue that businesses are utilizing our platform is through the expansion of our online commerce to people and businesses. So, for example, just very recently, this summer, we rolled out a product called Facebook Shops, where people can seamlessly shop on our Facebook app, and it connects small businesses to the communities where they serve as well. So, as well, Instagram, we're actually rolling out a new complementary feature called Instagram Shop. We're still testing that in the United States, but hopefully we'll roll that out overall globally in a couple of months. So this is just little bits of success stories and some of the products and services that Facebook is really utilizing to support and empower and build small communities around the world.
Thanks, Deji. That was really helpful. And your closing remarks about empowering and supporting small businesses is something that I'd like you to expand on, if you don't mind. So in many respects, certainly when the world is locked down and normal business circumstances is not available, how do I make sure that I can get to potential customers? And everybody will have the same intention. So how do I cut through as a small business on your platforms to start, enhance my brand and reputation and customer base through your markets? What are the characteristics of good small businesses who are thriving on Facebook's platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ian. As more people turn to their phones, even though we're in a lockdown, to discover new things, small businesses need a very strong mobile strategy, really. And Facebook and Instagram is the go-to solution to connect small businesses to the communities. One, I would say, is small businesses just need to have a strong mobile strategy. Be creative, lean in, and use the power of the communities where we serve. Very recently as well, there are a couple of things Facebook has done to really continue to support small businesses. First, I mentioned Facebook Shops, so which is on our Facebook app. Once again, another thing we've done is we've enhanced a lot of our features on our Facebook pages to really allow seamless transactions on our platform. We've also optimized this to include messaging and customization features. Really, that would allow people to even measure, really, small businesses measure how they're performing, really, and in communicating and reaching out to the communities that they serve. We've also launched on Facebook and Instagram very recently the Facebook nearby tool, which really gives people the ability to find businesses that are close to them, that are open, that are operational, what they do. And that's a tool that is available for people and businesses to really continue to communicate about what they're providing. Also as well, on our Business Resilience Hub, we've developed tools for guiding and advising different types of genres of businesses that really that can help people to think creatively, think about how other businesses are utilizing the platform, because we want to make sure people can learn from other people who are having similar challenges in really in supporting small business. So we continue to look at potential partnership with institutions and governments that are looking to continue to support small businesses. So overall, we are continuing to explore avenues, and we know there are success stories, like I mentioned, that businesses are really utilizing and creatively thinking of how to communicate to people who need the products and services.
Deji, thank you very much for that opening. That was really helpful and very informative. I'd like now to turn to the panel. And I'll introduce each of the panel, and in doing so, may I invite them just to say a very few brief words in terms of their backgrounds, their organisation that they work for, and crucially, as I think this will be a good way in which we can facilitate a good conversation, what are your key priorities now, at the beginning of September, 5 or 6 months into these unusual times, with still some way to go in terms of whatever normality will look like in the future? What are the key things that you and your organisation are looking at? Stephen, can I start with you? So may I introduce Stephen King, who's Head of Business and Enterprise at London Councils. Welcome, Stephen.
Oh, thank you, Ian. Just to say, my name is Stephen King. I work for the organisation which represents the 32 London boroughs plus the City of London. So we're not the Mayor of London. We're those individual boroughs, such as whether they be Southwark, Westminster, whatever. We're cross-party, but we are political. My role in this is to represent business and enterprise and work on business and enterprise. So it's trying to get boroughs to see them more as supporting businesses and less like regulating businesses. So we've been very busy over the period of lockdown, distributed over 1.6 billion in over 100,000 individual grants to businesses across London in the last 3 months. And now we're helping businesses reopen via our licensing officers and environmental health officers, helping businesses meet those kind of complex COVID-19 guidelines. In terms of the kind of priorities for the coming kind of year or few months, obviously a key priority for all of us and local government in particular is around preventing any further local lockdowns. Local government, as you might be aware, is taking a leading role in track and trace, and that is a big issue for us. In my area, it's obviously thinking about the resilience of businesses as we face that uncertainty as we move out of it. And we'll talk more about the individual sectors that have been most hard hit by this as well. Thank you.
Stephen, thanks for that. Can I introduce Matthew to say a few words? Matthew Jaffa is Senior External Affairs Manager at the FSB. And for international members, Matthew, perhaps you just want to outline who the FSB are and what your priorities are.
Yeah, so the Federation of Small Businesses, we're not the Russian Secret Service. So we are a lobbying organisation, a leading voice for self-employed individuals, micro businesses and small businesses. We've got about 160,000 members across the UK, and we are here to support them in ways in which to engage with, whether it be central government, the Mayor's office, or, as Stephen's mentioned, the local authorities. And for us, the priorities have to be around getting confidence back into those small businesses so that they are in a position when we start to see a little bit more clarity, shall we say, with where we're going in terms of the COVID crisis, whereby we start to see some elements of recovery moving forward. And for them, it's a case of confidence coming back into the jobs market. We are seeing a lot of redundancies taking place, but at the same time, we need a future autumn budget, which the Chancellor will announce in the next coming months, to be focused primarily around job retention, which has worked in terms of the furloughing system, but making that much more extensive in terms of supporting those that, God forbid, have a lockdown. So we need to make sure that this is flexible enough within the current job retention scheme, but also in the area of job creation is critical. Many small firms are pivoting, has been mentioned in earlier comments, and for those to be able to pivot and to be able to create jobs, and particularly those who have been more adversely affected by the crisis, and that whether it be people from Black, Asian, ethnic minority backgrounds, or whether it be young individuals or even older as well, it's finding ways for them to be in a position where they can work in small businesses. And for us, it has to be centered, any budget has to be centered around creating those jobs through the tax system. And that is also on top of a new Brexit, a new system, a new trading agreement with the EU and other counterparts across the world coming into force January 1st, being in the best position to support our small businesses in any future deal?
Thank you for that, Matthew. And Jackie, could I introduce you? Jackie Baker is Audit Director at the accountancy and consultancy firm RSM. Welcome, Jackie. Tell us a little bit about your firm's priorities at the moment.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As you just said, I'm a director at RSM. I've actually been with RSM for 15 years now, currently specialise in consumer markets and retail sectors. But in addition to what I do at RSM, I also have my own small business, which is a ladies' fashion boutique in Cheshire. So I've absolutely lived and breathed the issues that retailers in particular and other small businesses have had to deal with over the last 6 months. So priorities, again, it mirrors what my priorities from what I see from clients at RSM, but also my priorities as a small business owner. Cash preservation is key for me at the moment, making sure that we are secure to deal with any potential local or national lockdown going forwards, reshaping the business to make sure that we're robust enough to cope with anything that could happen like this again in the future. And another priority for me is market, embracing the shift to e-commerce for all retailers. And if we don't expect, we're not going to expect that shift to change anytime soon. So it's embracing change and adapting to what's happening across the world.
That's really helpful. And Jackie, I'd like to stay with you for my opening question, if I may. You're obviously very well versed in retail. And if you're a physical retailer, the last few months have been extraordinarily difficult if you're still even in existence. But of course, there are huge opportunities to be able to market to the rest of the world if you're online. What are the successes that you've seen in both of your experiences in respect of retail? Where are the opportunities and how do small businesses, I said in my opening remarks, 10% of small businesses in this country are retail in their focus. What do they need to be doing to make sure, consumer demand, which might be going down, economic activity, which may be declining, how in those really challenging times can small retailers thrive?
I actually, as you've just alluded to, I do have a small retail business. So the way that we succeeded through and we managed to continue to trade throughout the pandemic was e-commerce, and not just having a website, because I'm sure a lot of small business owners will know that it's quite expensive to get the right platform from an e-commerce point of view and get that route to online sales. However, there are other things, as we've discussed earlier, Facebook, Instagram, and the way that we continued to operate throughout the pandemic was via Instagram, and we had to embrace that change very quickly. On a bigger scale, though, there have been some major success stories from an online e-commerce point of view, and some are actually clients of RSM. However, they are in particular areas. Obviously, you've got the food and drink. That has seen a small decline since the bars, pubs and restaurants have opened. It's interesting to see what will happen now that Help Out to Eat Out to Help Out finished last week. But there's fast fashion, so the younger generation who want to buy cheaply online. It's a lower end of the market. That is something that has been a huge success throughout the pandemic, but there has been a specific demographic of people that would never have shopped online before, have had no choice but to shop online. And the big question for a lot of retailers now is, what will that demographic do? Will they return back to the high street, or will they continue to buy online? And that's a huge question mark for us. But yeah, it's embracing that change and getting that you've got to have some sort of online presence at the moment, because we're just not sure what's going to happen to the high street. The high street, I think, is very different though, because if you look at city centres versus local towns are performing much better at the moment than the bigger cities. And thankfully, my business is in a small local town.
Jackie, that's really useful to know, and that brings me on to something that I want to ask Stephen, which is, you're based in London. You're thinking about the 32 London boroughs. Obviously, there's a real pressure from government to return to the office environment. And if you're thinking from a small business point of view, a third of all small businesses in our country are based in London and the southeast. Now, how important are cities in terms of our economic prosperity? The last 30 or 40 years, we've seen, cities being absolutely essential. Will that continue post-pandemic? Or actually, will there be something that Jackie's mentioned, which is the lack of commuting means that there will be levelling up between towns and cities, and this will be beneficial to the whole regional agenda. So whereas it might not benefit your clients and members, perhaps it benefits the wider sense of a national equality agenda. Is that fair or unfair?
I mean, the big thing to say, to a bit of a cop-out, is it's too early to tell. If you look at the ONS data and if you look at the furloughing data, obviously what we've seen in central London is what we've seen across the UK is that certain sectors such as hospitality in particular, food, accommodation has just fallen off a cliff. If you look at the service sectors though, some of the big ones for central London, if you look at finance and insurance, they've been relatively resilient through this up to now anyway, in terms of turnover and in terms of furloughing. So what we used to do in those big shiny offices in Canary Wharf is still actually happening. It's just not happening there. Whether that will feed through, especially to small businesses, as you say, a lot of small businesses are in the finance, and we've done some research looking at kind of those kind of hidden small businesses which are occurring across London that are in the kind of finance and insurance kind of area. So they may well be getting the hit soon in terms of just because of turnover is so much lower that their clients that they're working for will be contracting and not putting so much work their way. So in some ways it's too early to say. I think personally obviously the big issue for central London, things like the West End, with retail still much lower down. It's lower down than say even a Manchester or Birmingham in terms of footfall. We are seeing that international travel is still kind of 90% down from what it was last year. So, a lot of the kind of the classic West End relies on lots of international travelers. They're just not coming. Predictions say they won't be anything like, come spring of next year. If we're seeing a return, that would be great, but nothing before then. So in many ways, I think there is an element of life support still needed, a focused life support for kind of business rate support to continue for certain sectors in the cultural and the accommodation side. Some of the retailers probably don't need that same level of support, but we will need that. And then we need to kind of carefully look at how we reopen. Speaking on a personal level, again, in terms of the rush, there's clamour to rush back to the office. I think it's, if I was a business manager, I would be looking at thinking my bottom line and thinking, well, I'm still making, if my bottom line isn't affected, if my staff seem happy, why am I rushing back to force them back into town? I do get the whole kind of, the ecosystem around it, lots of stories about Pret, but at the moment, we're not seeing a rush back to get back into town.
I want to continue with this on this agenda, if I may, and ask you, Deji, about this. In the UK, we talk a lot about that, what is known as place, and how London, in particular, as the capital and as the centre of political life, commerce, media, has really driven the rest of the nation's economy, and that could be to the detriment of areas such as where I live in the northeast of England. For a global company that's based online, a platform such as Facebook, does place matter to you and the people who engage with your platform? How important is it? Presumably there are opportunities in terms of exports, but being where you are located, to what extent is that a really important thing for your company?
Thank you, Ian. It is really important is that, you know, from the previous conversation we had, that small businesses, you know, continue to enhance their mobile capabilities and strategy online. So for us, small businesses are at the heart of our communities and where they are. So overall, we're really empowering communities wherever they are, whether it be in the cities or in the suburbs or way out, you know, far away from the cities. As long as we continue to provide solutions and tools, products and services that can allow businesses to connect to the communities, the neighborhood, then we will continue to look at and explore ways to support them. We know that there's been a strong transition of people to the mobile digital storefront. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, that is really encouraging. So for us, as long as we can continue to see that growth and really minimize income inequality, which really, I think the majority of that needs to happen way away from the cities, then Facebook will continue to lean on conversations with small businesses, local, global, to really support and push products that would support them. And we continue to see that happening. I think 85% of people worldwide are online now, right? And that wasn't the case a few years ago. So we continue to believe that that trend will continue. So we are thinking globally, but we are looking to implement our products and services locally, wherever small businesses and the small neighborhoods exist.
Thank you. Matthew, I want to turn to you and I want to give you a broader generic question, if I may. But before I do so, obviously there are many participants listening in to this webinar, and I would encourage, if I'm going down the wrong track for you in terms of questioning, please feel free to put me back on track. Let me know some of the questions that I can pose to the panel on your behalf. But Matthew, I'm really interested in what the FSB is seeing. And there is an element of place, but I'm interested that you represent small businesses across the country and across all sectors of the economy. We've heard about the strain in retail and in terms of hospitality, and there's been measures put in place by the UK government to deal with that. But in terms of 10% of small businesses are in the construction trade, for example, what sectors are doing well, what sectors aren't, and what do you think is needed in terms of sector-specific measures to help individual parts of the economy?
Well, I think in terms of what sector's doing well, it's not an easy one to say, this particular sector has had a great 4 to 5 months. I mean, it's been pretty much awful across the board, but I say the ones that have done least badly would be the ones who have been able to adapt and who have got the ability to adapt due to the fact that the systems work because they can operate from an online perspective. So, your IT businesses, your financial intermediaries, your insurance companies, I mean, they can manage that shock because, in the City of London, if you've got that ability, you can adapt and you can work from home a lot easier than you can if you're a street food market business. But it's, for us, the worrying at construction is a worry in those sectors because it relies on confidence, and it's not a case of confidence of the employer getting the scene right, getting the premises right between the hours of 9 and 5:30. It is getting from A to B and getting from B to A that is the most concerning to the employees, knowing that they are going to be safe, they're going to be healthy, they're going to get home okay and come in the next day because they've been using public transport. So it's that element of confidence that business but employees need, but also the tourism and hospitality sector. The tourism sector is a real worry for us. Our inbound tourism, our hospitality sectors that rely on trade from Asia, from America, and from other Western European destinations has taken an absolute battering over the last 5 to 6 months. And the fear is it's not going to pick up soon because there still isn't that confidence in travel, but also that confidence in coming particularly into the West End and the city of London. So we need to start to shift the dial. And it's not a case that we say, it's safe, all come in, let's get those numbers up to 100%. It has to be done gradually, but it has to be done with clear messaging. And unfortunately, central government, regional government and not holding hands on this particular issue. It feels that there's a slight power struggle going on between whichever political side you're on, and what businesses need now is clarity, concise, clear messaging from all parties, from all forms of government, so that they can start to get that drip jab message that we are starting to see that, yes, London is safe. We want to welcome you back, and we're doing it in the safest way possible. We're all in this together. And we just don't feel that there's enough of that coordination across all political parties currently.
I want to stay with you, Matthew, if I can, because in your opening remarks, you talked about jobs. And this isn't obviously just going to be related to small businesses. This is a natural risk and threat to the entire economy, which is, once we see the winding down of the furlough scheme, with subdued economic activity, we're going to see a massive spike in unemployment. What needs to be done in order to make sure that we don't see unemployment figures of 5-6 million, in terms of the UK and across the world in terms of rising levels of joblessness? What needs to be done to make sure that we can maintain those jobs as much as possible? Is it an extension of the furlough scheme? Is it sector-specific measures? What is the FSB calling for to help your members?
Well, I think we've seen interventionist approaches like the furlough system, like the Eat Out to Help Out schemes. They've been very welcomed by small firms because they are targeted, they are there to support at the most needed moment. And I think with that same spirit, shall we say, the government needs to recognise that fact. It shouldn't be cliff edge approach to policy making, and particularly with the furlough system, there are ways to keep it flexible. If there are spikes in certain areas, keeping that flexibility, but also if there are particular sectors, and talking of course about the hospitality sectors, those creative sectors, those that have not been able to get any form of grants, who are self-employed or directors, for instance, those are the areas we just must handhold through this particular time. But from a job creation perspective, you've got grants that government have announced in terms of apprenticeships. You've got a Kickstart scheme that's been launched currently, whereby you can get a funded placement if you are taking on someone who is under 25 on and is accessing universal credit. These are all welcome schemes, but particularly you need to encourage small firms to create those jobs, and the way you can do it is through the national insurance system, by giving targeted support, whether it be every employee you take on or reductions in the level of national insurance you pay. That encourages job creation, and that's been used in the past. We saw it under I think it was actually your previous Labour government, actually, in terms of the scheme whereby there were kind of NIC support in that particular area. The Conservatives have done it in the past and promised it in manifestos too. It's those areas, pinch points in that particular area, where you can get some tax incentives to taking more people on and creating more jobs and more future wealth in the economy.
Ian, you seem to have drifted. Can you still hear us? You're on mute. Ian, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
I think that's one of the phrases of 2020. You're on mute, so I do apologise. Jackie, I was asking you what your clients are telling you. What is the general business feedback in respect of, in the aftermath of the furloughing scheme with subdued economic activity, are you expecting a spike in joblessness, and what can be done to try and mitigate that as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, in the sectors that I specifically work in, the end of this month is a big deal breaker for most people, with the end of the furloughing, the rent moratoriums coming to an end, the relaxed insolvency rules coming to an end. There are lots of things there are lots of decisions that are going to have to be made towards the end of this month and through October, which is a real shame, I think, for retail and hospitality industry, all of the consumer markets type businesses, because this lead up to Christmas, this golden quarter, is the quarter where they could get themselves back together. That's the opportunity that they need. So I feel, yeah, government support, even just through to getting us through to Christmas, and that increase in trade, and that time of the year when they can try and pull something back, is really key. To let it all go now would be a big shame.
Thank you. Stephen, I'd be very interested in your thoughts about this as well, in terms of, we've talked about the specifics of the London economy, and it may be that those people who are at risk of losing their jobs could be low paid, might find it difficult to get another job unless the economy starts to pick up. What are you finding, and what measures need to be put in place? Stephen, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. Stephen, I'm
Sorry.
glad that you supported me there, and it wasn't just me.
You'd think after 5 months would have got this right by now.
Exactly. You.
London is an incredibly diverse city. Obviously, of the five the parliamentary constituencies, if you look at the furloughing data, the 5 parliamentary constituencies which have the highest number of people on furlough are all in London, and they're all in parts of London that already have high levels of deprivation. So if you're looking at places like Tottenham, West Ham, those kind of locations all have extremely high numbers of people in furlough, of course, which we're incredibly worried about. What's their future look like, because they're probably in sectors that are not going to open up soon, will certainly grow soon, such as, be they hospitality, accommodation, theatres. So, and as Matt was saying, the future of furloughing is a real worry for us. And we're not quite sure how we're going to come out of this. Kickstart, it'll be very interesting to see what Kickstart impact will be. It'll be very interesting to know from small businesses how attractive it is, because are they actually is the deal to take on a new person attractive enough to actually to take the bother of doing it. We've actually seen a decrease in the number of apprenticeships in small companies from the tracking that we do, simply because of the red tape around it. I'm quickly going to answer, if I may, a couple of those questions that we've seen on chat. One was about how should local authorities help retailers? I just don't think the funding is in our remit. We local authorities are under the cosh as anybody else in terms of funding. It's worth saying that the bounce back loans in London alone have come to well over £7.5 billion. So even small grant programs of £1 million here, £1 million there aren't really going to move the gauge on this much on an economy the size of London. So that's kind of a key issue. And I think, yes, the reskilling agenda is massive as well, helping people move from one sector to another. It's a great period of uncertainty.
And I want to touch upon that question that the audience has given when it comes to reskilling. And I'll ask all the panelists this. Perhaps I'll start with you, Matthew, in terms of what should government be doing to enable, facilitate, and where possible fund a reskilling agenda, rather than trying to safeguard existing jobs, making sure that the worker can move to a new job? What should be done to allow that to happen?
Well, first and foremost, there has to be, in our eyes, a fiscal incentive as an employer, particularly a small employer. If you're going to take on your first apprentice or your first member of staff, you have to get that level of support, because the cost of doing business is so high, particularly in London, that you need that element of support. So whilst the government has announced kind of a £1,500 or £2,000 grant support there for anyone taking on a young apprentice, we think that should be match fund in London, for instance, up to £4,000, which will really give an incentive for that small firm to do it, and they will pay the extra £4,000 to £6,000, whatever it takes, to get that person up to and train them on the job. In terms of the actual skills aspect, many people are going to find themselves unemployed. There's the hard and fast truth in sectors such as hospitality, in leisure, in retail, it's going to be very, painful for a lot of people, and we need to make sure that the support is there from government and local government level as well to be able to upskill those people to get those skills, particularly around digital upskilling in terms of whether it be customer services, whatever it be. We need to support them, but it's a case of interventionism, but has to be at those who have been most affected or are going to be most affected by the crisis, and that has to be those who are young, those who are from BAME backgrounds, but also older people as well who have been more effective from a health perspective, who will also look for a change. So there's no silver bullet on this, but from us, it has to be targeted interventions, but really, again, that central local government working hand in hand.
Jackie, can I ask a similar question to you? Again, what are your clients telling you when it comes to reskilling? Are they saying that the workforce has skills that need to be reskilled in order to maintain my business? Or is it a case of the emphasis should be on those displaced workers who unfortunately have lost their jobs, giving them the capabilities and capacity to get back into the job market as quickly as possible?
I think we need to address both. However, I think it's very different for every single sector, isn't it? As Matthew's just mentioned there, digital upskilling is going to be huge for a lot of people. We've talked about e-commerce. When you think about we've talked about the demise of the high street and the rise of e-commerce. You can't just come along and set up a website and make it work. That needs skill, it needs money, it needs funding. So where are small businesses going to get that from? That's a really important point that needs to be taken forward. And again, thinking about smaller businesses, I also think they need help in making their business dynamic again, finding some of the softer skills of finding that niche to attract people in again. I think is a big deal for me.
Deji, can I bring you in on this agenda as well? And the way that I'd like you to sort of focus on this, if you don't mind, is every economic recession with a wave of joblessness unleashes a subsequent wave of entrepreneurialism. People think, I've lost my job. I've always had that business idea. Now is the time to go forward with it. Are you expecting at Facebook something similar in terms of what's going to go on? And again, just to reiterate your opening remarks, for those new embryonic companies formed by first-time entrepreneurs who may have lost their jobs, what help can you give in terms of those reskilling agendas that we were talking about?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, so let me preface by saying that entrepreneurs are resilient people, and the path to recovery through this pandemic is uncertain, and it will require a lot of support from governments and other institutions to be able to get back on track. Quite recently, Facebook released a global state of small business report in partnership with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the World Bank. And it is the first in an ongoing series of reports. And what we found really just to that point is that it's quite sobering, right? We surveyed more than 30,000 small business leaders across 50 countries, and quite like a quarter of those, closed between January and May this year. And that figure rose easily to 50% in some countries. So we do understand that, there's a lot of challenges to go forward, but there's also success stories. And I think one of a couple of ways we will look to support that is we will continue to take steps to help businesses weather the storm. Creativity is definitely one of the first ways that entrepreneurs are thinking and resolving issues today and getting back online and selling products and growing. Quickly pivoting, and moving their products online, utilizing our suite of services from Facebook to Instagram to WhatsApp and Messenger, continues to be a gateway, really, that a lot of small businesses are sustaining and staying in business. We are continuing to provide guidance on our business resilience org. And this is actually catered to different genres of industries, from retail to manufacturing to restaurants. You know, it's a wide swath of guides and that small businesses can utilize. So these are really tough times for businesses all over the world. We know that, but Facebook is determined to do all we can to help them make it through. We will continue to explore potential cash options, but we cannot do this alone. You know, I want small businesses, people to visit our business resource hub, where we have a lot of tools and guidance. But we know this is uncertain times, but we're confident as well that we are resilient people, and we're very optimistic about the future as well.
Deji, I want to stay with you if I can, because there's a really good question from Michael, and it focuses not on your organisations. I'll ask all the panellists, but on your own personal experiences in the 5 or 6 months since the coronavirus took hold. Michael asks, what is the one resilience lesson that you have learned from the impact of the pandemic? And I'm interpreting this, Michael may tell me otherwise, I'm interpreting this as that personal experience. So in the few months that we've had this, where the world has been turned upside down, what's that resilience lesson that you will take away for the rest of your career and life? Deji, can I start with you on this?
Yes, thank you, Ian. Resourcefulness. You know, I know that we're hurting, and, you know, different circumstances, different people. But what I have seen, and more so encouraged by really over the past 5-6 months, is just as people are coming together as a community. People are reaching out, small communities, neighborhood shops, partnerships. We continue to see that across the board. So rather than not focusing on a lot of the ills and, you know, the uncertainty around what has been happening in people and loss of jobs, I would want to go with encouragement, really, that I have seen survivor stories. I've seen people turn corners. I've seen small businesses go from, you know, uncertainty closed for a few months with no revenue to slowly getting back to 60-70% of their revenues. And so my personal experience is really, I have friends, I have, you know, partners, and just really looking at across what's happening. I am just encouraged and hope that people can lean in, dig in, and look around and share success stories of how they've succeeded, and people read those and encourage others. So for me, that's the biggest takeaway, is really just encouragement.
Jackie, can I ask you the same question? What is that one resilience lesson that you learned through the last few months?
Yeah, the resilience lesson for me has got to be the importance of the ability to adapt. It's been key, I think, in personal and business for everybody. And the quicker you can change and accept that change, they're the businesses and the lives and the families that have managed to see themselves through this successfully.
Thank you. Stephen, any lessons for you?
I would just repeat that one about adaptability. It's been amazing to see the adaptability of some of our entrepreneurs. I now buy my vegetables from a company that used to supply restaurants. Obviously that disappeared, and they just pivoted within 2 weeks to do an amazing home delivery service for people. You know, I've got friends who do tour guiding. They've now had to do virtual tours. They're doing virtual tours in American time for Beatles fans. You know, people have been, and I'm just stunned by the resourcefulness of entrepreneurs out there.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And Matthew, what is the lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, as mentioned already, adaptability, but I would also say not necessarily needing to be a hero and doing it all on your own. I think a lot of the time, small businesses, self-employed, think I should have all the answers. You know, I've set this business up myself. I need to do it all on my own. And this time in particular has taught me, speaking to businesses and hearing the really emotional argument, or the emotional side of what they're going through. You know, just speaking to people even from a mental health perspective, speaking to a friendly ear in terms of someone who might be able to lend a voice to speak to a friendly person in the council speaking to another business on a networking platform who might know something else or help you into a new area. So I think a case of, just from my perspective, it's that nothing will lose the kind of the face-to-face interpersonal relationships. As much we like to do things, we're working more in isolation, we work on our phones, we work on our devices, and we're stuck in there. Nothing will take away how important it is to have that face-to-face contact and that engagement.
Thanks for that. This has been very much a UK-focused webinar, largely because of the incompetence of the chair. I realise that there are international participants in this, and Deji, you're obviously speaking from California. Given a large proportion of the audience here will be from the UK, will have very much that UK-centric view. Given your global perspective with the Facebook platform, are there any lessons from other cities that we in the UK could perhaps learn from? Are other cities or other countries returning to normality, returning to economic activity, perhaps in a really good way? And what are the characteristics that UK businesses should consider?
Thank you, Ian. The challenges we are seeing globally is consistent locally in a lot of the cities across the globe. And so, it would be hard pressed for me to pull a specific city that is doing better than the UK. I mean, a lot of the challenges are stemming from just the restrictions, coming from the government, and inability to really access finance and cash, right? And so overall, a lot of these big cities, you're right, a lot of big cities are pretty much just trying to navigate the same process with a lot of uncertainty. Things change almost on a daily basis, from the number of cases going up or down, and it's just really trying to pivot as quickly as possible. In the state of California, where we were on lockdown for quite a while. We were happy seeing encouraging news when the numbers were trending lower, but then it started to spike up again, and businesses had to close again. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's really no one clear that I've seen anyway globally city that has the answers at this point. We're all trying to figure it together out.
I'm very conscious of time, and the hour has flown by. So I've got one final question before I hand over to Robert, if I may. And could I ask the panelists to give sound bites, one sentence answers? And I'll start with you, Stephen, but again, I'm going to give it to all of the panel, which is, this is about helping small businesses recover. What's the one piece of advice that you would give the audience in terms of helping small businesses recover? In one sentence, please.
Talk to your council. They may actually be able to help you.
Excellent. Jackie?
Adapt, be open to change.
I do like how succinct everybody is. Matthew?
Keep talking to all stakeholders and people you wouldn't normally talk to.
Thank you. And finally, from California, Deji, what's the one piece of advice that you would give small businesses to help them recover?
Lean in. Visit Business Resilience Hub or Business Resource Hub on Facebook. We have tools and guidance that would help different kinds of businesses to think creatively to succeed this pandemic.
Thank you. And thank you to all of the panel. I think the audience will have got an awful lot out of your insights and experience. I certainly have. And I just want to thank you and thank the audience for listening and for participating. I've been really honoured to be able to participate in this. And I want to thank you, Robert, and Resilience First for allowing me to do that. But can I leave the final words and for the closing of the webinar to you, please?
This has been a fascinating hour, as you said, Ian, and it's covered a lot of ground. And on behalf of Resilience First, Facebook and ICAW, and all the participants, I'd like to thank the speakers and particularly the chair for an excellent contribution today. We'll be circulating a short summary in due course. And in that summary, I will be inviting a small group of people on the line to join a small interest group to review the workings of a new app on community resilience. We will also be circulating some details on a free offer from Thames Water to small businesses to help them. And all it leaves me to say is please do join us on our next webinar, which is on the 9th of September on the topic of extremism and terrorism. So finally, thank you very much. Take care wherever you are, and goodbye. Thank you.